Hello, friends, and welcome to the first installment of the interview portion of Free Your Story, Free Your Life podcast. I am so excited about introducing this segment to you all. This is something that I have been thinking about for almost 2 years. But the purpose of the interview portion of the podcast is my goal, and really the goal of emotional writing, is to change the narrative of trauma, to make trauma, even though trauma is a scary place, trauma is not fun. Trauma is not something that we jump up and down when it comes into our life. But for most of us, trauma becomes something that can be a launching pad. It can be something that transforms our life in a very beautiful way. And that's what I want to focus on, because when we go back to the scary places, we find gold somehow. And I want to discover the gold in other people's lives. So, my first interview guest of this installment, which makes you very special, which he's already special in the best way. My guest is Phung Nguyễn, and I am going to have him introduce himself and tell us a little bit about yourself first before we dive into your story.
Love that. Thank you, Amy, for actually hosting this. I think this is going to be an amazing project that you're working on, because there's just so many things people want to talk about. And I think a lot of the times that people are scared to tell their stories and be able to willingly express themselves. But like you're saying, right, that's actually your energy. That should be the fuel to take you on to the next level that you want to go. So my name is Phung Nguyen. I am a online marketer and advertiser. I currently live and reside here in St. Pete, Florida. I'm originally from Louisiana. So if you guys have ever seen the show Duck Dynasty, or have heard of that show, it's a show with a bunch of Cajuns from Louisiana with big beards. So I would classify myself as a redneck Asian, and hence the beard. And there's not many Asian guys walking around in the beard. So it's a very unique look for me.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love the redneck Asian, which maybe we'll see how that is lived out in your story. I love that so much. But I want you to dive into, of course, all of us have probably multiple traumatic moments in our life, but I know for you, you've chosen one that you want to share with us. So the way that I want you to set this up is take us to before the trauma. So set us up. Who was Phung before this traumatic moment, and then take us to that traumatic moment, but don't just take us in detail. Let us know, what were you feeling in those moments?
Okay. So it's funny you talk about traumatic moments. There's two pivotal moments that I always think about um, when it comes to what I'm currently doing now. So for the backstory itself, I'm a former IT professional. So I used to work a regular 9 to 5 job. I'm 34 years old, so I spent most of my 20s working night shifts and graveyard shifts for multiple different types of industries. So I've been a waiter, I've been a bartender, I've actually worked in a bank. I was a pharmacy technician. I was a brief moment of time was a loan officer, but ironically enough, all my background actually stems from construction work. So I was actually a construction guy for a long time, and then when I decided to go to college, I just didn't attend class. I wasn't the best of students. Growing up, I also didn't have the best of grades either, as the stereotype being that Asian people are really good in school. I definitely am not one of those Asians. I was, in fact, a C student, and I would only see the back of my eyelids all the time. That's how much of a C student that I was.
I love it.
And so I grew up very traditionally, and what's interesting is that I grew up with an immigrant family. So when my family came over here from Vietnam, the education piece was drilled into me, and it was, you gotta go to school, get your education, work a job, and then you'll retire, you'll have a family, you'll do all these things if you just abide by these rules. Ironically enough, that's not what my family was doing. My dad is an entrepreneur himself. So when he came over here, he had to build everything. He came over here with nothing but his shoes, sandals, and shirt on his back. That was it. And then created his whole life that way. So what I just found it funny that my dad would be like, "Yeah, you gotta get educated. This is what you got to do." But he's building a business and being very entrepreneurial. So I had very mixed messaging growing up. Like I was
Yeah.
just like, "Oh, I'm working as my helping my dad build a business and networking and talking to all these people, but I'm also in school, and then I'm told that I should go get an education and work a regular 9 to 5." His message to me was that he didn't really want me to work as hard as he was working and wanted to have my life a little bit more leisurely done, which I loved, honestly, but it just wasn't for me. So I say all that to say that I just have a wide variety of experience and I've lived life like very differently. So with one of the big pivotal moments for me was one I did one of the the most deadly drug that you can take in all of the world, which is DMT. And what it is, it reenacts death. And so that when I did that, I was unconscious for about 7.5 minutes. And I probably went on the wildest experience of my life. Funny enough, I write about this little segment. I typically don't like to talk about this segment a lot, this period of my life, because it just these experiences are kind of looked down upon. People are like, oh, he just had like these issues and stuff like that, couldn't really cope with it. Well, yeah, absolutely, I just couldn't cope with life at the moment, so that's why I did drugs.
Can you pause right there, because you
Yeah.
just said so much that I want to touch on, right? You said that it's hard to go back to that time frame because of people's perceptions, right? Which,
Yeah.
like, gold right there, which is why I think sometimes we're afraid to go back to our trauma. It's not because of us, it's like what other people perceive of us. So when you were taking DMT, what was the draw, right? Because this is the deadliest drug. You already told us, like, you're not living life normally, right? Like, you're
Yeah.
breaking all the rules. So what is it that's pushing you to look at the deadliest drug that you can take and you're like, yes, that one? Why did you go that route?
Well, I didn't live a normal childhood, whereas people got to hang out with friends, play with their friends, and do all the things. Where I got to do a little bit of that. Most of my childhood was actually spent helping my dad build things. Like I said, my background is construction. My dad built everything in our home. The house that we had lived in and grew up in when we moved from I lived in the hood and we moved out to the woods. Like that's like how it happened. So living in the hood in Louisiana, my dad wanted a whole different life, and then he saw the environment that was happening and formulating in that area. So I got to still experience a little bit of that. We moved out into the middle of the sticks of Louisiana when I was about 9 or 10 years old, and actually, no, when I was about 9 or 10. I was actually about 5 or 6 when we moved out there. Wally was just born. So my brother and business partner were about 5 years apart. And what was interesting about it is that I just didn't get to hang out with my friends all the time. My best friend lived about 35 minutes away from me, and I would love to go hang out with them. But at the same time, I just had to be in the house all the time. So my childhood was very suppressed. So you can imagine, like, when you lived a really repressed and suppressed lifestyle as a kid, when you turn of age and you become an adult, you're ready to go batshit crazy, right? And that's essentially what happened to me. I just was like, I didn't get to hang out with friends like I thought I could, and the my high school days and stuff like that. But I did play sports, and that was kind of like my outlet. That was like my only outlet. I had to, if I wasn't in school, I was coming home to work and do homework, or I was working on the house with my dad, like doing yard work. We even during the Katrina days back in 2005, 2006, we built a whole nother house for like relatives and family. And then we ended up like housing a lot of our family when Katrina hit. So doing a lot of I don't know, I could qualify it like as babysitting, honestly. I was practically helping everybody like fix their life at a very young age. And so I felt like I didn't have that type of experience, normal American type like childhood where you go out and play ball with your friends, ride bikes up and down the streets, stuff like that. Where I got to do that for like 15 minutes. I had to go back to work. That's how I lived my childhood and being very suppressed. So going into my adulthood life and going to college and then going into my professional career, like I was just like, I'm going to do an experiment with everything as much as I can because I don't know what any of that's like. And I didn't want to bring anybody in with me on that. So I had a very interesting mindset in that I was very specific on how I experimented with drugs. And I obviously I started out with marijuana first, and then it just kind of led me up. It is not a gateway drug. It was just the easiest thing to obtain. Just want everybody to know that, like, when it comes to drugs, weed is the easiest thing to obtain. Everything else is really hard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
So
I
when it,
practically touched everything.
yeah, when it got to like you getting ready to take DMT, right? What are the emotions that are directing you to plug into that? And what made you risk that? Because I know some people who can take that and like very negative experiences can follow. So you almost have to be to the point of saying, I mean, I'm either going to live and it's going to be great or like something really terrible is going to happen. What brings you to that precipice?
Well, being repressed a lot of the times, like I would say in my earlier 20s, I was very suicidal. Like I just didn't enjoy my life at the time, like going to college, going through the motions. And my family wasn't very communicative, right? Both my parents, English is not their first language, and so and I don't even speak Vietnamese, like I understand it to a certain extent. And I know when people are chastising me and yelling at me and making fun of me like that, I understand that's easy. But when it comes to like actually having conversations, right, like it's a little different because if English is not your first language, then it's hard to be really expressive on those things. So open communication wasn't the biggest thing in my family, at least to me. And I have four other brothers, one younger than me and then three older than me, and so they could tell you we have widely different experiences with our family, and it's over the couple of the last few years we've had like interesting things. So what led me down the path of like just doing drugs in general was because I felt like I was unwanted in the world, right? Like I just thought I was just doing, what my parents told me to do, what society thought, that was good for me, right? And like I just didn't understand that programming, so it led me down to like this very depressive state. So when I decided to do DMT, I was pretty much like, I could either have a really bad experience or have a really good experience, right? And I kind of stemmed more of like having a bad experience of like, you know what, like I took DMT when I was 25. And I can honestly tell you that I didn't believe that I was going to live past 27. Right. Like just because of my lifestyle that I was currently at. And it was just that type of way for me. And I have multiple instances where I can count on one hand how many times I actually tried to take my life. And during those times, I had somebody who reached out to me the moment that I was trying to do that. So I find that I reflect on that moment a lot when I was doing DMT because I was just like, okay, cool. I need some answers, right? And no one is going to give me the answers but myself. So when I ultimately decided to do it, it was a very selfish thing for me because I was like, I just don't know what life has to hold. What does purpose mean, right? Like, what am I even here to do? And I've always like, I read stories about people's like experiences with DMT or just on psychedelics in general. And they were like, oh, I've had this like amazing like guide, this amazing experience. Like I saw life in different ways. So when I did DMT, let me tell you that all the stories that I've read of people being greeted by some sort of deity or God himself, right? Like was there and was like took them by the hand and led them down this path. It was not like that for me. I saw darkness.
Well, for people who don't know about DMT, can you just talk about once you take it, what is it supposed to do to your body? And then what was your experience? Like, take us to moment, real time, like, because I want to take DMT through you. I don't think I want to take it. So let
Well,
me be on DMT through your experience.
yeah, so I learned a lot about psychedelics in general. So I had taken mushrooms, I had taken acid before, but never DMT. So I tried to understand. I'm just such a person who likes to understand the details of everything, and so to kind of give you history of like what psychedelics do, um, mushrooms give you this like feeling experience, right? Like you feel like really like more body high type thing. You feel more one in tune with nature, right? So I equate it to be Mushrooms is like a surface level type thing, right? Like anything on the outer world that you wanted to like exchange and then kind of like think to yourself a little bit on what's happening from in the outside world, take some shrooms. Acid actually projects your conscious thoughts, right? So whatever your subconscious thoughts, right? So your whatever you're thinking in your brain, you're kind of going through, that's like been bothering you and stuff like that. I recommend people taking LSD and acid because whatever's working in that subconscious that's causing some issues for you, right? Like that's what it does. So it projects your subconscious out there. DMT really like it makes you pass out and you pretty much it's all subconscious, right? Like you're not necessarily awake, so you actually go to sleep and you're actually experience this astral type projection type thing, right? Where it's a completely outer body of experience where acid and mushrooms, you have this, you're still in your body, you still can maneuver in this space, right? People are like, oh, I see like dragons and stuff like that. That never happened for me either. But people say that they like, they get things get really colorful and things starts to move. They get to see all kinds of crazy stuff, and those are your subjects, your subconscious projecting certain things that you've already like kind of experienced or have thought about before. Whereas DMT takes like all conscious thought out and is completely subconscious, and it kills your ego. And when I first started reading about it, I was kind of fascinated just in general. I was like, what does that mean of like you going into a different plane and just it's just you and your subconscious, right? And I just think about the inner voices that you have in your head. What if you could meet that inner voice, right? And I think that's what DMT does, is that it allows you to meet that other person that you have within you, not necessarily like with acid or mushrooms. So the the thing that was going through my brain before taking it was like it's like I just needed to work on something, and I wanted to experience something so extreme that it was not what everyone else had experienced, right? And come to find out, my experience with DMT is very unique in itself. As I tell you the story in just a minute, like I have read many stories about people's trips and stuff like that, of them seeing different types of deities, the kind of experiences that I had a friend that took DMT before me, and he ended up telling me that he had this beautiful deity come and greet him and take him by the hand and led him to what was he dubbed the tree of life, right? And then what happened from the tree of life is that this stump had pulled up from the ground, and there was a book on it, and he said that with the lady ended up taking him to the book, and it showed him every step of his life and steps after his life, right? The things that he could potentially do. And so that was the kind of like the groundwork that I was looking at, just talking to other people. I was like, oh, that'd be really cool to experience. I would love if
Great.
someone could
Open my
narrate
book.
life. Yeah, like tell me my story, like please, like, right? Like I would love it if someone was just shared my story like that. Um, so that was like what I was kind of looking for, was like what is my own meaning to life at its current time, being in a family of five, and then being in a small town too, right? Like I thought my whole world was revolved around where I was currently in my hometown, and that was my space, right? that
Yeah.
that that was my reality. I would never venture out of that, and that was the thing. But then I did DMT,
Mhm.
and that set me on a interesting path. So, like I said, I was out for about 7.5 minutes, and when I smoked it, I didn't like other people. There's different forms of taking it. Like I had a tube, and it was like a little powder form on like a little like platform that we had made with like a mesh type situation, and we had a lighter underneath it, and it would vaporize it. So you didn't burn it, didn't have a direct flame on it, but it was like hot enough that it just kind of like vaporized it. And it had a tube on it. It honestly looked like I was doing crack. Like that's what it looked like. Honestly, like
Yeah.
it looked like you when you're pulling out a tube and like a mesh like sheeting and a lighter. You're just like, this seems kind of hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm already like the visual in and of itself. I'm like, I'm already terrified. But
Yeah, yeah.
but I guess that's kind of the point. When you're on the edge of something, it's supposed to be terrifying.
Yeah, it's supposed to be terrifying, and at least in my opinion, I think it's supposed to be that kind of like extreme type thing that you're looking at. At least for me, I was looking for something like that, and I just remember looking at the tube. I was like, I was like, I feel like I'm really doing like a really like hardcore drug here, the DMT molecule is in everything. We had a friend that was a chemist, and he actually synthesized this DMT through grass, right?
Oh wow.
Yeah, literally just out in wherever, right? I picked up some blades of grass and like chemisted out, and next thing you know, powder form DMT. I was like, oh man,
Yeah.
that's weird. It's like I didn't know you could just smoke grass like that. And
So
so
once you inhaled, was it an immediate, like, was it immediate gone? How quick?
it comes in like two phases. When you're starting to inhale it, right? Like the objective is to not exhale. So you have to inhale the whole time and then hold it within your lungs for as long as possible until you're like almost blacking out, right? And then that's what I did. Was like I just as it was continuing to vape and you see the smoke starting getting a little heavier, that's when you're like, oh yeah, you gotta inhale more, inhale more, inhale more. And then sure enough, as I inhaled, I'll never forget this moment. Is that as I was inhaling, like I was told to like lay back, and so I started laying back in my bed, and I could see right in front of me there was like this figure right on my wall. And so I started off in my bed. I was laying very comfortably in my bed, hanging out, and then I had like a wood panel wall that I was looking at. So all the patterns on it started to like formulate a face, and I was just like, oh, that's kind of weird. And the next thing you know, like I'm like out, right? As I lay back, I completely blacked out. And then next thing I know, I'm in my I'm in my subconscious now, right? And so there was this moment where I was like, it was just pitch black. I didn't see anything, and then it switched over to just completely white. And at that point in time, when I realized they went from black to white, I was trying to look at my hand like this, and I couldn't see my hand. And so at that point in time, I was like, oh crap, I'm dead. I was like, I don't know what's supposed to come after this. And that's like,
Mm.
this kind of like set me into a small panic mode a little bit. And then as I'm sitting in this completely white space, there's this little speck that I see like right in front of me. And like, it didn't matter where I moved or like that speck was still like right dead center of my vision. And then I would say, I don't know, a couple of seconds go by, and then I see the speck multiply into different types of spectrum, different types of dots. And it just kind of like, it looked like a bunch of pin needles, but imagine those pin needles are every color of spectrum of the rainbow. And so I get to see all of these colors. And then next thing you know, all these colors all around me. And I can put my hand up like this, and I just see an outline of my hand within all these colors. And I was like, holy crap, what is going on? And at that point in time, I decided to take a breath, right? As because at this whole time I didn't know that I wasn't breathing, and I'll actually tell you about my physical part here in just a minute. So the person that was administering this to me was Wally, my brother. So he was there with me to do
Mhm.
this because he had done it before too. And I had told him, I was like, I want to try it and see what's going on. So when I took that breath, inhale, next thing you know, imagine like all these colors just like attacking you, right? And they're just like coming at you full force. And I'll never forget the song that I was listening to while doing this experiment. And it was Imogen's Heaps Hide and Seek. So I have to send you the song later. And it's such a like crazy type music that you want to listen to. Like I blasted off completely. So when I
Mhm.
inhaled, all of these colors started to absorb me and go into my body, into my mouth, into my eyeballs, into my ears. And I kind of like panicked a little bit. And I was just like, oh my God, get off me. What's going on? Right. And
Yeah.
at that point in time, I could hear Wally in the background going like, it's okay. Calm down. I've got you. It's okay. Calm down. I've got you. I said, okay, cool. Wally's here. And then at that point in time, I released. And so imagine that when I released, I imagine like what it felt like was like someone had like grabbed my chest, like on my shirt, but it was actually like my skin and like pulled me up. right? And it was just like me, my subconscious getting lifted up out of my body completely. That I come to now reflect on quite a bit is that that's what was happening, was that someone like took my body into another like dimension, so to speak. And my favorite description to like talk about this is that imagine you're walking up and down the street and it's completely pitch black, and the only thing you can see is a light post at the end, right? And as you're walking towards this light post, right, imagine someone comes up to you and like your shirt that you have, and it just takes your shirt and just peels it off of you. But it's not like they like remove the shirt off of you, but like they just pull it like this, and it like disintegrates from your body, right? But now imagine your shirt being your friends, right? The worries that you have about your finances. Imagine your pants being, your family, right? Imagine your socks and shoes being your morals and ethics, right? Everything that was being peeled away from me. And by the time I got to the light post, come to find out, that's my ego, like human ego, completely being dissolved. That everything that I was worrying about no longer mattered, right? Like I was just here, and that's when the realization to me, I was like, "Crap, I'm dead." like, like this is it for old
This
Funk.
is it.
Right? This
Yeah.
is this is where P Hung meets the maker, and and so as that's happening, it was very pitch black for me, and I was walking towards this light, and then when I got to the end, like I did not worry about what was happening in the world. Everything in my brain that I was like concerned about didn't matter anymore. And then I got to see the entire like solar system being created in front of my face. Like I'm imagining life being created in front of you, and I honestly feel like I sat there for thousands of years, right? That's like how long it felt to me. Was I was just in this different area in space. And so I ended up going to the edge and sitting down and just watching, just my hand like this. I still remember, like I was sitting there like this and just watching planets collide and being created, stars being created, solar system, the earth being created in itself. Right now, I don't know if that's a deity or someone guy just showing me that. Could be. But I still talk about it. It's like no one was there to greet me. It was just me, just hanging out
Yeah.
by myself.
Great.
And so as I was like recollecting all of that, and then I got to stand up, and I wanted to take a leap, like a leap of faith, enjoy and going out there and exploring and seeing what this whole dynamic of this like this universe had to offer in space. But then all of a sudden it was like something stopped me, and I could sense that my actual thoughts of the real world was coming back. So this is how I knew like the drugs were wearing off, because I was like, oh shit, I'm coming back.
Yeah.
And so what happened in my brain at that time was like, I am not ready to experience what that is. Even though, as much as I want to go out there and see what that has to offer, I have not achieved, me pointing backwards, of like, I have not achieved what I wanted to do back there. And in fact, I don't even know what I'm trying to achieve yet. So, how can I be ready for this if I've never done that before?
Mm.
Right. And I was just like, okay, cool. Let's see. Let's it's like I have to go back. I have to go back to where I belong, into this real world. I'm not actually ready for this. And so as I'm coming back and coming to, um, it's an interesting thing because I talked about astral projection, and I'll never forget like this image in my brain, because as I was coming back, I could see where my body was. Now, remember, I told you that I was laying in my bed, bundled up. Where I saw my body was I was on the ground, like on the floor of my ground, and my head was in Wally's lap. And I had a friend that was there that was standing in the doorway, and my ex girlfriend was laying on the bed. And they were all just staring at me, right? And it looked like my body was cold, is what Wally was saying. Is that, and they were like, "Oh my god!" Like I was pale and everything like that. I didn't have any color, and so like they wrapped me up in a blanket and just laid me on the floor and just had to like wait it out. And so as I come back and come to, it was just such a fascinating experience for me, because after I came to, the first thing that I had come back to and said was like, I had this like stuffed I had this stuffed doll, like this penguin from, I don't know if you ever watched the show Friends, but he had this Joey had this penguin, and so I really liked the show Friends, so I also had a penguin. I named him Hudley. and Hugsy was laying on my chest. And then the first thought that I had was like, can someone get this stuffed doll off my chest? It's incredibly heavy. And Wally goes, well, at least you know he's all right, because he literally came out with a joke.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think he's fine. And so when I got up and started like coming to and stuff like that, I just noticed, I was like, why am I on the ground? And not only am I on the ground, my room is a complete wreck, right? Like, and I had things like stable, like organized. I had this shelving system in my room where I had all my clothes. I had like nice shirts at the top. I had my pants in the middle, all my stuff at the bottom. And apparently, during my freak out, when I was just like trying to take all these dots off and stuff like that, I had flipped around in the bed and kind of like spun around a little bit. And Wally was saying that I looked like a human swastika. And I was literally like spinning like I was possessed in the bed. Right. And then I had flipped onto the ground, and I had ended up like flailing about and stuff like that. And I ended up grabbing my table and like started slinging it around, like actually physically throwing around. At that point in time, Wally had to look at me and he goes, well, that's unusual. And he put me in a full Nelson. And that's when he starts like, I need you to calm down, like relax, stuff like that. And that's what I said. That's what I heard him in the background. Like,
Yeah,
so he actually like calmed me. And at that point in time, I had released,
yeah,
and what I come to find out as I've recollected that particular moment a lot of the time is that I have a control problem. So I felt like I felt like I should have had control over my destiny, but when in reality I didn't. And so that experience itself has set me on a path of like understanding what purpose truly is. And you can only really figure out your purpose in life is by helping other people. And so at the time, I had helped a lot of different people in general, just like in their career or like helping them move or whatever. But I never understood why I was doing that stuff. And so as I've ventured more into more, and I'm 34 now, so it's been almost 10 years since that experience. I still live a life very purposefully because I feel like I know what it's like to die and not achieve the things that I was going to try to achieve. And here I am wanting to achieve those things. And it's for me, a lot of it stems from not necessarily being wanted, but having value in life and just helping people get to where they want to go. Right. And I think that's probably one of the more important things that I have that's going for me is that it doesn't matter if I get paid or not. If I can help you get to the next stage where you're happy doing the things that you do and you feel like you're supported in those things, then that helps me out. That gives me purpose, that to know that someone else has like got to the next stage that they wanted to. Right. So that's where I think like one big catalyst that happened for me, that big traumatic event for me was like I just didn't understand life at the time, being completely like suicidal and being very depressed about life, being completely overweight, just an incredible drug addict. Like, and I was a high functioning drug addict at the time. Whereas like what I mean by high functioning, I could have a conversation like this with you to be I was taking painkillers and like Xanax bars and stuff like that, and you would never have known because that's like that I was in a high stress situation, so I couldn't let anybody know that I was doing those things.
yeah.
Yeah.
I want to go back to when you first came out, right? Because it's so like, it's so incredibly relatable with the idea of almost like going through life numb and like you're feeling like there's not really purpose for you, you're not valued, especially in the way that you said that you grew up, which, has so much value to you now. I know this, but it's like when you experience something where you could have died. You know what I mean? It's like you could have jumped in. You could have done what was like you thought you wanted. Like, man, I don't even want this. But something drew you back that said, I'm not done here. Like, I'm not done on earth yet. There's something that I haven't experienced. So when you wake up, right? And obviously, like, the world doesn't change. You're coming back to the same
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
you know? And I think people don't understand that. Like, when you go to a dark place and trauma happens, as you're coming out of that trauma, like the world around you doesn't really change. It's just something inside of you changes, which then allows you to navigate differently.
Yeah.
So I guess my question to you is, once you came out of that and you realize something is here for me that I need to accomplish, what then changed inside of you to then change that path for you?
That's a great question. I would say what changed when I came back to is was I changed how I viewed myself. Um, I just wasn't. I didn't feel like I was confident in myself, and then didn't feel like I belonged. Right. When reality, we all feel that way. Right. We all feel some sort of like disconnect from people, and we're just not sure how we're supposed to how our piece fits into the puzzle of life, right? And I think that's a big question that everyone typically asks themselves. But then I started to understand myself a little bit better of like, well, the more that I figure myself out, the more that I just try to love myself, understand myself, and realize that the opportunity that I've been given, the gift of life, is very, very nil to, and I mean, if you think about like you being born in the South, I think about what Gary Vee talks about. There is a 1 in 1 trillion chance that you are born, you yourself as an individual. And I think that was that kind of like set me on this like thinking path when I came to was like I do matter in this world, even though I can't change how I got into this world or my current circumstances. The fact that I'm alive and I'm able to do something about it and do the things that I want to do, I'm capable. I can think, I can walk, I can move, I can lift things up, I can talk, right? I can communicate. I feel like if I worked on those things for myself better, then it would be easier to find life, find purpose, right? Talk to people, right? And figure out what it is that why you're here, right? Why does it matter that you're here? And I think what happened was is I was just so uncomfortable in my own skin, which is why I was experimenting with drugs all the time because I was playing into this narrative that other people had painted for me, right? Of like traditional education, right? Like you gotta go get your 9 to 5, right? Like, and I just didn't do well in school, and I was like, why do I have to do something that I just didn't enjoy? But then as I've gotten into my entrepreneur world and stuff like that, I've come to realize like that's a programming thing that's been set upon us from since education has been built, right? Since money and since like a dynamic of power has existed, right? I don't know, I can't change that, right? And so then as I've gotten more comfortable in my own skin, that was what set me on that path of becoming comfortable in my skin. It's just like I had to be okay that I'm not perfect. I had to be okay that I wasn't going to do things right. I had to be okay with making mistakes and just being honest with myself. And so this is where I came up with like this is I've heard this before somewhere, but I remember particularly about 2 weeks after that moment, I had three phrases that came up to my brain, and it was I fucked up, I don't know, I need help.
Mm,
And the fucked up part being that like I fucked up, I'm not perfect, right? I'm going to make mistakes, and I have to be willing to admit that, right? That it's not going to be perfect, that it's not going to be the sometimes I'm not going to be at my best, and it's okay to be that way. Um, but saying that I don't know what I'm doing, right? That becomes another thing because now I'm admitting that I don't have the skills. I fucked up for one, then people typically hide it like, oh yeah, I messed up, but I'll do, I'll do something different next time, right? I'll be better. Instead of saying, no, I messed up, but I don't know how to change it, then can you help me get to the next stage,
mm,
right?
yeah.
Having those three things layered on each other, I think is so important. We live in this time in this modern society where we do a lot of like in the we live in the or. It's got to be this or this, when we
Mm,
really should be living in the and, right? I messed up and I don't know what I'm doing and I need help, right? Saying and these things, right? Because you as a human, as an individual, right? Like you're not linear. It's not black and it's not black and white. It's not apples and oranges. It's like you have multiple fruits. You have many colors of the spectrums of the rainbow, right? You're just like,
Yeah.
okay, cool. How do I make this work for me? And
Yeah.
I think that was the biggest part for me, is like figuring out that I had such a wide variety of background and skills in life. Like I worked multiple jobs. I was in college for a little bit, then dropped out, and then just started to hit the workforce full force, but didn't feel like any of those things that I was doing like mattered. And then I transitioned over to my freelancing career, and then started figuring out that I can do contract jobs and make money on the side. But while I figure out my other things and explore and then talk to people, have different types of conversations. And I'll never forget leaving my hometown and talking to an old acquaintance. I would say that he was a former friend. We're not like really like buddies and stuff like that now, because I'll never forget what he said to me. And it was, I told him that I was like, I'm going to venture off and I'm going to go figure out, I'm going to explore the world and see what the world has to offer. I was like, everything can't be done in this hometown. I was like, I don't care what you have to say, but the fact that both my parents are immigrants and came to this city of Louisiana, like, there has to be more to this, than there has to be more than this town, right? And nothing wrong with that town. It just wasn't where I wanted to be.
Right.
And what my friend told me was, you know what, man, like I believe in you. And I think you're going to amount to doing great things, but I think you're stupid. I think you're stupid for doing the things you do, because there's a better way of going it. And I remember asking him, like, can you name a better way of doing it? Well, I'm not really sure actually, because I've never done it before. Okay, then I need you to shut the fuck up.
Yes.
It's like I don't, and then at that point in time, I had severed a lot of like my old friendships at that time, because they just weren't in the same mindset as I am. And I was like, there has to be more to life than what this is. You can't tell me that I want to work that IT job, sit in that hometown, play video games, and drink on weekends. Like I was like, there's more to life than that. There's way more to life than that particular thing. And I need to go out and experience what life has to offer, aside from drugs, right? Like
I
aside
want
altered state.
yeah. This is the part that I find the most interesting. And this is kind of going to lead us. I'm going to ask one more question. And then I want you to make the connection for me, because I'm going to do a nice little setup. One
All
thing that
right.
I always believe about our most traumatic moments and our pain is that it becomes our core message. It ends up becoming what we offer the world, because we are an expert at our pain. It's something we're always having to go back to, always having to hone, so that it ends up being something that we teach. And I find it so fascinating that you went through such a heavy time in your life where you felt disconnected, you didn't feel valuable, you didn't feel like there were people in the world who really cared about you, and you didn't feel that there is purpose. And I know that you do a lot of the marketing side, but one thing that I know is really close to your heart is connection and networking and helping people. And I want you to really quickly talk about what that experience is now helping you to offer other people, even in your personal relationships and in your conversation. What did that trauma birth in you from a standpoint of purpose for other people, essentially?
I love that question, because I'll actually will take you a little further back from that moment and like where this type of thing. So to give you context of like what it is that really connected for me, was understanding how to provide space for someone to really express themselves freely and have a support system. And what set me onto that path was that, as you know, that Wally and I, my brother and I, are really close, right? We're like best friends. But it always didn't start like that, right? As most friendships and relationships they always start a little rocky. In fact, Wally and I really despised each other. We did not have the best interactions growing up, because um, at a young age, like I said, I was working a lot and helping my dad, and going to all these places, not really experiencing a good childhood, so to speak. And I had a great childhood still, but at the same time, like I didn't get to do the things that I wanted to do. I did the things that my parents wanted me to do. And so that was kind of like, I kind of resented my brother at that. And so what set me onto this path essentially, and then led me to experiment with more drugs and then go into DMT, was this particular moment with Wally and I. And it was when I was in college. And so when I was in college, he was getting ready to finish high school. And I'll never forget sitting in my college dorm and just hanging out. And I had been in college for 2 years. Now, in those 2 years, my parents only visited me once, right? And I live 45 minutes away from them. So it's not a very far drive, right? My brothers didn't call me. I had another brother that lived close by, but he had just started a family. So I wasn't going to bother him. And me and him had just started really rekindling our relationship. And we have a joke between me and him. So he's the second eldest, and I'm the second youngest. So he's number two, I'm number four. And so we have this thing where it's like, as even numbered children, we're much classified as the black sheep, but we have way more thinking ability than the odd number kids. So that's like our inside joke for it. So for what happened was is that when Wally went to college, I had this realization of like, I did not want him to experience the same things that I was experiencing with my family, because I just didn't have the best relationship with my family. And, if you can't rely on your family in certain instances, who can you really rely on? And that's like the belief that I had. And, living in our modern society now, I see a lot of families getting torn up and broken apart. And it honestly breaks my heart, because it's like, if you don't have family to rely on, and family being very subjective, right? Whether it's really close friends where you can really freely express yourselves and you have that support no matter what, then, you know, life is going to be hard for sure. So when Wally went to college, I had the realization that I didn't want him to experience the same things that I did. Even though my parents would go visit him more often, he didn't have any visitations from his brothers. And so when I decided to call him one day and was like, hey, like, I want to talk with you. I want to have like a good relationship with you and stuff like that. You can only imagine, like, when you don't like somebody, and especially in your family, and you pick up the phone, you're like, oh, what is this conversation going to be like? Oh my
Right.
God, like this guy's going to be annoying as hell, right? Like
Yeah.
I had already thought that was going to happen in my brain from him. And so I was like, I'm going to have to win my brother over in some sort of instances. And then the moment for me was going, okay, I'm not a very good sibling. Like, I don't know how to be a brother to whoever, but I know how to be a really good friend. I know how to support somebody in whatever it is. The caveat being that we're related. So you have to live with me forever anyway, right? So that was like my realization that I had with him, was that I didn't want him to not have a connection with family or his brothers that was going to isolate him in different ways. Now he might not have, but I that's the way I felt at the time, because I didn't good have a good relationship with any of my brothers at the time, and I was on this path of rebuilding my relationship with my entire family, because I had lost most of my friends at this point in time. And at this time period too, I'm a former drug dealer, right? Like I was dealing all kinds of stuff at that time. So a lot of my friendships at the time were very transactional, right? But none of my family knew what I was going through, or none of my family knew what I was doing, so to speak. So I didn't have, while I seemed like I had really close friends, they weren't really that close, because the only thing we really connected on was having a good time, right? We did not know how to have those hard conversations. And so when I had that conversation with Wally, that's what kind of set me on this path of like understanding how to support somebody no matter what's happening. It doesn't matter if they're wrong, it doesn't matter if they're right, it doesn't matter whatever they're going to, they just need the support. Because I didn't have the support that I grew up with. So I felt like I need to be that support for others. And that is essentially what I've accomplished now in my own entrepreneur career, was going, when things are shaky for you, right, who's there to support you, right? And when things are shaky for myself, like, who's there to support me? Well, like, I had to build confidence in myself, right? Like, I learned how to admit to my own mistakes, learn how to live my life with mistakes, because there are certain things that I can't control. Like I said, like, I had a freak out moment where my room was a wreck. Well, because I had a control problem. I felt like I had to control the narrative. I had to control certain things, that if I wanted an outcome to happen, like a perfect world ideal situation, then I needed to have my hands on it and control it. Can't do that, right? But I can be in a space where you feel supported, you're not judged at all, and you just want to talk, right? 9 times out of the 10, people want to vent, not really ask for advice. So that's been like a big thing for me as well too. It's like, are you looking for advice or you just want to vent? It's like, I'm cool with you just venting, but if you want advice, I'm gonna let you have it. But if you don't, I'm
Uh-huh.
cool, that's fine, right?
Yeah.
And not many people are willing to offer that option. And I wish that was the option that was given to me in my adolescent and in my early 20s, right? Here I am coming into my mid 30s. I'll be 35 this year. I understand a lot of what it means to be just supportive in someone's current decisions, right? Because whatever choices that you make, whether it's right or wrong, you just need support,
Yeah.
right? And then you have to be willing to make those mistakes and then learn from those, right? And then have that tough conversation. And so when I started doing that for myself, it started to bleed into other things in my areas of my life. And that, I think that's ultimately what I do really well, is understanding how to support someone in their decisions. It's like, okay, cool, if this is what you want to do, here are the steps that need to happen to make that happen. But if you're not willing to make those steps, then you need to pivot.
Yeah. I love that. Probably, and I'm not saying this facetiously, you know me. This is honestly one of the most fascinating interviews that I've ever done. And I love the connection. I always, anytime talking about trauma, I've experienced so much to understand that trauma just leads you closer to like your core, your true self. So then you can offer really true, authentic help, love, resources, whatever it is to those people around you. So before we leave, first of all, I want to thank you 1,000 times over for your vulnerability, for this amazing, incredible story, for sharing your experiences. Cannot thank you enough. Have the highest level of respect for you. But I know that you, one, wrote a book that is so much about this topic on connection. So I want you to share that. Tell us how that we can contact you before we do a sign off.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, like Amy said, I did write a book. I have a copy right here. It's
Yeah.
called Fist Bumps and High Fives: How to Create, Connect, and Cultivate a network of high value relationships. And at the bottom, I have right here, it says, Empower yourself to empower others. And what I talk about is that understanding, distinguishing the relationships, right? And being able to do that immediately in your brain of like what kind of conversations are going to happen. Because if you're able to do that, right, you can separate yourself from people who are going to waste your time, or people who are going to really be supportive in your venture. And so I have these three circles that I talk about, right? Of like, you have your professional circle, you have your personal circle, and you have something called your passerby circle. And figuring out these three dynamics is been like my whole life, so to speak, right? I've just had such wide ranges of experiences that like my circles are very, 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 very tight. Like the people who are in my inner circle like know me very well, and like I can call them on anything, right? And it's very few that I have. But my professional and passerby circles, they're much larger, because I understand that I'm going to meet a lot of people, and especially if I want to be a part of this world, I should want to go meet a lot of people. And then you can figure out very quickly on what people are doing in life if you're being very intentional with your relationships. So it's like identifying like, well, okay, cool, how do I be comfortable with myself, and how do I want to provide value to people? Then figuring like what your skill set entails, like what you kind of offer to the world, what kind of conversations that you give, what kind of presence that you offer to people. I think that's a big part of like what I'm able to help people with. And yeah, honestly, I think people should go get my book, read about it. If you're having troubles with like figuring out things of like within yourself, right? Like learn how to empower yourself, right? You may not have to read my book, but I definitely think you should, because it'll help you identify some of these relationships a little bit easier. Because once you see it, you're not gonna be able to unsee it, and that's like my biggest thing in life in general. It's like, if you show me the process, you show me the outcome, then I know how it's done day in, day out. Like I have no questions any longer. And I think that's what a lot of people have is like questions about themselves. And it's like once you figure out yourself, you're able to help other people a lot easier. And yeah, you can contact me on Instagram at phung.com. It's PHUNGDOTCOM. So I spelled out dot because the other dot was taken. Um, and you can email me at fung at ineedthismarketing.com. ineedthismarketing.com is my business agency that I help people with their marketing strategies. But yeah, those are the two places you can contact me. I'm more than happy to chat with you, talk with you, consult with you, and honestly support you in whatever venture that you got.
Love it. I'm gonna be, the link to the book is going to be in the description. Also, your handles on Instagram and your email. So if y'all are interested in those you are gonna have easy access. Phung, my friend, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you to all of you who have listened today. Remember, trauma is not trauma's not your trigger. It's not something that you have to be afraid of or stay away from. Trauma is your superpower if you are able to use it to help you grow, thus helping the world around you. So thank you so much. Join me again for another interview next week. And remember, when you free your story, you free your life.